Hello and welcome. This is the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass. Today we're making a professional chiropractor connection with Dr. Laurie Meinholz. Can you just introduce yourself, Laurie, and share a little bit about what inspired you to become a chiropractor?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Dr. Laurie. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. And actually, it's kind of funny. When I was doing my undergraduate degree, I was getting a degree. I didn't know what I was going to be in my life or what I was going to do. And my mom actually said, Laurie, you would make a great chiropractor. You should go to chiropractic school. And so, just to kind of amuse her, I went on a tour of Palmer with her, and I finished the tour and I was like, mom, I love what they say. I'm on board. It's everything I've thought about health and how things should be. Um, but it's too much work. Like, I don't want to be a chiropractor, right? So I actually said no. And I took a couple years off after undergrad, lived in the real world, right? And did some crap jobs that I hated. And my dad actually ended up getting hurt, and I ended up having to take him to a chiropractor to fix up his knee. And I was taking him there 3 times a week for multiple weeks, and her office was always behind, and she was short staffed. And I'm kind of a take charge person. And so I said to her one day, why is your office always short staffed? This is driving me crazy to watch. And I don't even have an investment in your office. And so she said, well, I can't find someone to work. Do you want to work here and answer my phones? And I was like, yeah, I could do that. Like, it's not that hard to answer a phone, right? So I get the job there, and within a couple days of working there, I decided that I was going to go be a chiropractor, and I applied to school. And within a year, I had started at Palmer. So turns out my mom knew all along.
It can happen
Yeah.
really fast, but I'm just curious. Within that year, what did you spend time on? Like, what was your sort of preparation for chiropractic school, if you may? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, lucky for me, that year I was working in that office. And so, that doctor practices different than I do now, but she allowed me on slower days. She still had handwritten notes at the time. So on days when it was a little slower up front, she would allow me to come in and shadow her in exchange for taking her notes. She also sent me to school to learn how to take x-rays. So I already had that under my belt. She would do line analysis, the typical like Gonstead pelvic and cervical line analysis with me. And then she also trained me in like the therapies they did at the office, like ultrasound and stim, which I don't do now, but at the time was interesting to me to learn how that fit in and when she utilized it and didn't utilize it. So I did a lot of that. And then I also did a lot of just reading about chiropractic online. Like, I'd go home and I would just Google chiropractic and read everything like good, bad, and ugly. And there's a lot, there's a lot out there, right? But yeah, and then I'd go back to work the next day and I'd say, hey, Dr. Lee, I was reading XYZ online, can you tell me more about it or talk more about it? And, of course, she'd have like 3 minutes before patients would start and would throw something to pique my interest, right? And then I'd think about it all day and ask her at lunch. And, so I had the luxury of really using her in that office, and the other people who worked there to really kind of dig in and start learning right away.
Yeah, I'm curious because I listened to how you kind of said that there's the good, the bad, and the ugly online, and I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you could kind of talk about where, you're planning to go to chiropractic school, you're reading things online that are obviously bad and ugly, more so than good,
Hmm. Hmm.
oftentimes. How did you react to that, or how did you respond to that? Did you just question it and go deeper, or did you become aware that there's obviously like a lot of resistance towards chiropractic within society, or outright dislike? Just curious.
Um, yeah, I think I already had a good idea that there was some dislike before I even did the online reading, just from growing up, as a like typical kid in the medical model. And I'd also knew that in my childhood, my dad wanted me to go to the chiropractor as a little baby, and my mom was afraid I'd get hurt. And so my dad would sneak me to the chiropractor. So as an older kid, I grew up hearing that, knowing there was like some ugly, right? But then reading about it, I really felt like reading about it, the claims against it, I just didn't quite believe. To me, they seemed very fake or very impossible. And the one thing I will say that did really scare me was like the idea that you could give someone a stroke with adjusting the neck. And so I did go into school thinking, well, I just won't adjust anyone's neck. Like I'm just going to be a chiropractor who's only going to adjust in the thoracic and lumbars and pelvis. But that's still better than, being a medical doctor or any other part of healthcare. But then I was able to go into school and ask that question. A lot of my professors of like, why does everything say online talk about stroke with adjusting the cervicals, and what does that mean? And it gave me the questions to drive me through school, and then get past that and realize that's not actually a thing. So
Mhm. Do you have any reflections on arriving at school besides that thing that you brought to the teachers about stroke? What was your experience like? Any insights you could share with students that are going into school today of, what maybe
hang
surprised you or what frustrated you, or things that you can do to maybe help incoming chiropractic students? Oh, we lost her. This tends to happen. Well, I appreciate the two viewers that are out there, and this pre-Chiro project is something. Oh, we got Tim Shaw. Here we go. We know some. Oh, here. She's back. Here we
I'm
go.
back. I apologize. I got a phone call and it rang through, and then I tried to decline it, and somehow I got offline. So sorry
No
about
worries.
that.
Do you know how
Um,
to do not disturb or hit the focus button on the iPhone?
yes, one
So Tim Schaub's
focus.
on. He
Here we
said, "Hey
go.
Laurie, good to see you on here today. Enjoying hearing more of your story this morning."
Oh, hey, Tim. Okay, I've got do not disturb on. I'm sorry. I should have put that on to start with, and I don't know. I'm
That's
not
what
thinking
video
clearly
editors are
today.
for. And just to be
Oh,
transparent, a
perfect.
lot of these answers will just be spliced up into like little short, because we got that TikTok attention span in society,
Yeah.
especially with younger generations. But can you get back into like what your chiropractic student experience was maybe early on, and what you gravitated towards, what direction you went when you were in school?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I actually I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, which is right near Mount Horeb, and home of Dr. Gonstead, right? So my grandparents on both sides of my family were actually patients of Dr. Gonstead. So I grew up hearing stories about Dr. Gonstead. And the memory that sticks in my head is that first day of class in Philosophy 1 with Dr. Victor Strang. We were in the Hall of Philosophers, and he started, the Hall of Philosophers at Palmer is this really big lecture hall, and you enter on the top and you work your way down to the front, and um, there's all these giant portraits of chiropractors on the side, and he's going through like D.D. Palmer and giving two sentences, and he gets to Dr. Gonstead, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot, like Dr. Gonstead's a chiropractor, my family went to him, I should maybe go investigate the Gonstead Club. And so I show up at Gonstead Club. I really like what they have to say. To me, as soon as they explained it and the premise of it and the very mechanistic approach, it just made sense in my head. So I went and actually visited my grandma the next weekend, who was my last living grandparent. She was kind of losing her memory at that point, but she was so excited to hear I was a chiropractor or was going to school to be a chiropractor, right? Um, and she looked me like dead in the eyes, and she was like, you go learn what Dr. Gonstead did. Like, you need to go learn what he did and do that. And so through school, like 2 months later, my grandma died. And through school, I just felt like I have to at least do her justice and learn what Dr. Gonstead did. And then, so I went down the Gonstead path, obviously. It's still what I do, it's still how I operate. So I'm very strict Gonstead office. I take full spine x rays of everyone on the old school films yet. Um, run the nervous scope on everyone, and then I just have Gonset equipment, the pelvic bench, knee, chest, cervical chair, and the high low. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. That's what I do, and I've just never swayed from it. I just liked it so much, and it just made sense to me in my head. So,
Can you give some direction to the Gonstead Club if you were talking to them now of like how they should maybe plan their training as a group, what they should sort of focus on maybe as a progression within different skill sets, because there's so many different skill sets within that approach. Can you maybe just unpack that further of like all the different skills that you need to develop if you want to really achieve a level of excellence in Gonstead?
yeah, that's a great question because Gonset is extremely difficult technique to do properly. What I have found in my experience is that the the better you are at detecting subluxation, the easier it is to adjust. And so what I found in school, when I was messing around with my friends and we're trying to get a cervical chair adjustment or get that atlas to move, whatever it is, um, we were setting up on like maybe fixations or maybe not, like maybe things that were moving freely and not getting anything to move and getting really frustrated. So I would say, first of all, start with like learning how to run the scope down. They say to run the nervous scope, you need 10,000 glides before you understand it and can read it properly. So, like, I know it's kind of the boring part, but just practice running that scope and running that scope over and over and over again and your palpation, because then once you're on the right segment, then you'll really be able to move it a lot easier. It'll still be hard because you're a student and you're still learning, but you have to like do that foundation work first. And then at that same time, you're practicing running the nervous scope down and your palpation and just trying to find a subluxation. You can be practicing like thrusting into the air. When I was in school, we used to practice like cervical chair up against our hand like this and just like give it a little go, or thrust into high lows in clinic, thrust into the back of our legs, anything to start, getting those muscles to fire, and just reading about it, right? Like any minute you can get, any 10 minutes before class you have 3 minutes, open up your study books and just start reading, and then the adjustments will start to come, like is what I found, that the adjustments in Gonstead are difficult to do and they take a certain skill level, but at the same time, they're really easy once you're on a subluxation and you're pushing it the right way. If you have a C2 PLS and you're doing the right line of drive, it's simple. If you have a C2 PLS and you're trying to move it the wrong way, then it's like really hard, right? So you got to be pushing it the right way. So, start with finding the subluxation.
And Virgil Strang, he wrote a philosophy text that I had read in the past. Can you talk about what it was like having him as your teacher and just kind of like how he primed you to really stay focused on chiropractic throughout school? Because as you know, students are so distracted these days. There's so many directions that they're being pulled in school. So it's like, I'm just curious if he had any impact, if you read any of his texts and recommend them, and then also like what kept you connected to your own path throughout school.
So I actually had Victor String as a teacher. So I think Virgil was the
Virgil,
father,
the
right?
dad, yeah.
I sometimes they're both V names, and I've gotten them confused in the past. But you know, Dr. String is an interesting man because he knows a lot. He's highly passionate, but he can talk for hours, right? Without interruption, without questions. And I oftentimes found myself in class, maybe not like daydreaming, but in amazement. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying anymore, but I'm just amazed. I know you're in this like 10 levels depth detail on, principle 9, and I'm just in awe. I don't even know what you're saying anymore, right? And so I really had to back up and start with very basic books. I started reading like Fred Barge's books, like Life Without Fear, something that was a little simpler and easier for me to digest, because without our philosophy, we're not anything. There's patients I have every day who are like, oh yeah, my kid just walks on my back. Okay, well, that might be similar to what some chiropractors do if they're not actually detecting a subluxation and doing pre and post checks, right? Maybe not quite, but you get what I'm saying. And so for me, just really digging into the philosophy and trying to understand it, and knowing that every time I think I fully understand it, there's something more to read. Um, so I would recommend Life Without Fear by Fred Barch. And then I'd also recommend Stevenson's chiropractic textbook. I was asked, or I was told with Stevenson's chiropractic textbook, by a mentor of mine, to just read the entire book the first time through. Just like keep reading. They're like, just read it and get an idea of what he's saying. Just get like a overall umbrella and try to keep up, right? And do it within 30 days, so that way it's always in your mind. And then the second time you read through, to read through the book and answer all the review questions, and don't move on until you've answered and understand all the review questions. And that took like forever, because there's some hard questions in there, right? But the cool part about doing it that way was the first read through, I kind of got where he was going with the book. The second read through took me a very long time, but then I could go to Dr. Strang and say, hey, I don't understand this review question. And then he'd talk for 30 minutes and I'd leave probably more confused than when I started, but it got me thinking about it, right? So I would do that if I was a student.
And so can you kind of just walk us through like what that transition was like into the real world? Like you graduate, you got into practice. How did
Mm-hmm.
you transition? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I precepted my last trimester. In the beginning of my preceptor, I actually stacked all my hours. I mean, if I had to be there 20 hours a week, I was there 40, whatever it was. Any hour the office was open, I was there. So that way, at the end of my precepting, I actually really wasn't in their office hardly at all. And instead, I was actually going between where I was living, where I was precepting, and Decorah, where I knew I was going to open. And I was, starting to remodel. Well, first I was getting the bank loan, getting somewhere to lease, then starting to remodel. So I actually started remodeling my office space before I even graduated from chiropractic school. I had my bank loan all lined up. So that way it was almost exactly 6 weeks post graduation, that I was opening the doors in my clinic, because I knew my student loan payments would kick in 6 months after graduation, and I wanted to be able to pay them. Yeah, so I just hit the ground running, and I just went with it, and I figured it out as I went. Like when I opened, I didn't have like any posters for the wall, and I couldn't afford any, and my office looked real goofy, and people would come in and I just say, oh yeah, like the shipping got delayed, they'll be here next week. And then on the weekend I was like on Google for chiropractic posters, what can I afford? I just went by the seat of my pants, and it worked out great.
Yeah, no, I would love for you to keep expanding. There's so much creativity and freedom in a new graduate who's starting their own practice and not trying to run into an associateship, or, you have to have an inner belief that you have the skills, that you have the ability, that you can also reach people and connect with people. So can you kind of just keep elaborating on like whether you believe that that was the right path? I mean, that was the right path for
Mm-hmm.
you, obviously, but when you are observing students today graduating, there is a vast majority that just want to go and work for another doc, or get involved in an associateship, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
bashing that, but I would love for you to just talk about how that experience was for you of like coming out of school, the mindset that you had, or any recommendations you have for people that want to take that path.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm wired maybe different than some, and I think whatever path people take is okay. But my thoughts were, if I associate for somebody, I'm going to have to build my own clientele anyway. Like, I'm not going to walk in the door and they're going to go, oh yeah, here's your 50 patients you're seeing today, Laurie. Take good care of them for me. Like, no, they're going to expect me to go out to build a clientele to make them more money than I'm going to make. And I was like, hey, I don't like that idea. If I'm going to build a clientele, I'm going to do it for myself and for the longevity of my practice right off the bat, because I don't want to have to build that up twice. The second thing I went in thinking is just knowing that I could make it. You know, like, I never had a doubt. I never had a plan B. You know, people would go, you know, now they'll say, so when you first opened, you know, I've been open for 9 years, and they're like, when you first opened, Laurie, did you ever think, like, what were you going to do if you didn't make it? I'm like, it never crossed my mind. And I think a lot of people are missing that you can't have okay, I'm going to do this, but if that doesn't work, like, I'll get a job here instead. Like, you can't. For me, it was all or nothing. It was all in. And I thought, you know what? I was 27 at the time. And I was like, I don't really have anything to lose. I have a $3,000 car that I paid cash for that's a clunker. I don't own a house. I don't have any kids. I don't have any pets at the time. I wasn't married. So if I lose everything, like, what are they going to do? Take my cervical chair and my nervous scope? I'll just go get a new one. You know, like, it wasn't a big deal to me. It was like, just throw in my chips I have, which wasn't much, and go for it. I will say I was terrified in the fact that, can I actually make an adjustment? Because in the town I went into is a small town. It's 8,000 people. It already had like 6 other chiropractors who all had been there a minimum of 15 years. And none of them were Gonstead chiropractors. But I still had that thought of, like, you know I want to help people. I know I can do the business end of it. I know I care for people. I know I can find a subluxation, but how well will the patient think I'm correcting it compared to the other doctors who have been out for more than 15 years? And so I asked one of my mentors about this, and I still hang on to this answer and still try to bring this to my practice. But he said, he's like, Laurie, the adjustment doesn't matter as much as you think it does. If people know you care, and if people know you are trying your best to get them better and to make a difference in their lives and to help them, they will stay with you. That's all they want. He's like, sit down and listen to them, hear them out, and get them the help they need, whether it's in your office or somebody else's office. And that's all that matters. And I really found that to be true. At first I was like, okay, you're just blowing smoke up my butt and trying to make me feel good about starting out and whatnot. But I really found the more I sat and I listened to people, I made, when I first opened, you know, after the first day, after I had x-rays and everything taken, my regular appointments were 15 minutes long, which other offices in town are only 5 minutes long. And so people were just happy that I would sit down with them and I would just let them talk about, you know, their back pain, their headaches, their sciatica, whatever. And I'm just, okay, yeah, tell me more about that. Or what about this? And what about that? And a lot of them would say, you're the first chiropractor who's ever listened to any of this. And then, of course, you know, we talk about chiropractic and, you know, the actual chiropractic, not just the pain-based model, right? But they just wanted to be heard. And so a lot of my initial patients stuck around just because of that. And I'd get people coming in saying, you know, I hear you'll actually listen to my problems. I'm like, well, yeah, of course, that's my job. Right. But that's a pretty low bar. Like, I mean, anyone could do that. A current student could do that. Right. I mean, that's not hard. And I kept thinking too, like, you know, we had, I forget which class it was, physical diagnosis or something like that at Palmer, where we learned to take a case history of a patient. And I thought, that's the dumbest thing I've learned, because these people, I just set them down in my office and I say, what's your problem? What are your concerns? And they talk for 15 minutes and they tell me everything I need to know. I never had to ask, like, oh, do you have any pain, numbness, or tingling in your arms or legs? Do you have headaches? Have you had surgeries? I mean, they would just like and tell me the whole thing. It was wonderful. I'm like, I don't know why. I mean, I know why we learned a case history, but I'm thinking, I don't know why we learned a case history, because all you have to do is sit and listen and they'll tell you. But so many people don't really listen, right? But yeah, that. And then I started implementing, I would call every new patient that night and check on them and ask if they had any questions and see how they're doing. And then once I got, their pain fixed, right? I say that just because that's how I talk to my patients, right? When they're in that acute stage. Once that got fixed up, then I'd call them and I'd say, a week in, are you still doing well? A lot of people will re-injure themselves at this point. I just want to make sure you're okay and remind you that you still need to come in to get checked. Sorry, I got a fly around me. But, just reminding them, you still need to come in and get checked. This is why it's important. But calling them those 2 separate times, people have told me that they've never had a doctor call them unless they have really bad news from a scan or an x-ray, not just to say, hey. So those things really, I think, made my office stand out and made it a lot different than any other office in the area.
Mm-hmm. Can you just reflect, because me and you have been in practice about the same amount of time, and I also started my own practice right out of school. Can you just reflect on these last nine-ish years of just the experience, what it's like to be a chiropractor?
It's awesome, right? But it's hard. I find it's this might or might not make sense to viewers. The longer I'm in practice, the easier it is, and also the longer I'm in practice, the harder it is, right? But I really feel like you get better at detecting subluxations, at adjusting and communicating with your patients as you go. And I've really found that looking back on when I first started, I'm like, wow, I can't believe people stuck with me. Like, I was awful. Like, my cervical chair adjustments, my side posture, my knee chest work, like, why do people stick with me? And then I'm like, all right, because I cared about them. I listened, all this information, right? But then you compare that to where I'm at now, right? And then I think in another 9 or 10 years, I'm probably going to think the same thing about where I'm at now, right? But I've enjoyed all of it. It's been hard. It's been easy at times. It's been a challenge. I think the continual challenge is getting people to understand what chiropractic really is. So for example, like I have a running club in town that I operate. And last night, we had a meetup for it, and this new runner was there. And she's like, yeah, I know you're a chiropractor. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what do you like about it? And I was like, well, honestly, what I like about being a chiropractor is I'm not treating anything. I'm not adding or subtracting from your body. All I'm doing is helping your body function properly so it can work as it was designed to work and heal when it needs to heal. Like, I don't have to figure out how much medication you need or what kind of surgery you need or anything. Like, I'm not that smart, but your body knows. And I just have to like unlock your true potential through an adjustment, right? And we're talking about it. And she's, we're having a conversation back and forth. And I feel like she's really getting it. And then she goes, oh, yeah, I went to a chiropractor once because I had neck pain. And now I haven't had neck pain, so I don't need to go. And it's like, did you just hear what I was talking about? That's, I think, the most frustrating, like to me, I was really naive when I opened, and the thought of like, I live in a town of 8,000 where I'm opening. At some point, all 8,000 people are going to understand because I keep telling everyone what this is really about. And I'm still like, I know more people knew than when I started 9 years ago telling people. But why don't they all know yet? Like, I swear I know all 8,000 of them, right? So that's where I get frustrated in practice is like, how many times do I have to say this until people really understand? And how many ways do I have to tell them until they really understand? Right? It's just a really, especially when you've had the same conversation with the same person about 300 times, you begin to think,
Yeah.
when are they going to get it? Right? But I also know I shouldn't expect them to get it because everywhere else they're being told the exact opposite. But that's my biggest frustration of like, man, I thought by 10 years in, at least half the town would understand. It's clearly a very naive student idea,
Yeah, no,
right?
I mean, I want to keep this on the student, but I feel like what you just said is a perfect segue to like what this project is really aiming to bring, which is new and fresh and asking new questions because I also am asking that question of like, what do we need to do so that we can reach a tipping point in society where people are starting to have what you just described be the normal thought process on chiropractic, that
Mm,
it's a process that like the dentist you go to the chiropractor throughout your life, that we're not trying to necessarily fix anything but keep you healthy and keep promoting greater health, because obviously the spine is has a different functionality than the teeth. But my point is just like when I just had a baby recently, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, maybe. But we go to the library and there's no books on chiropractic for the kids, for the babies, for the
mhm.
kids. And this concept of pre-chiro keeps growing in my mind of what it actually really means. It's like not just for the college and high school student and career changer, it's also for the kids. It's like, how do we get
Mhm.
that message, that beautiful message that you just shared, that I'm sharing on a regular basis, to the kids, so that they can grow up thinking of chiropractic differently, because that's, I think, the issue is you had that conversation with that woman. Well, she
Yeah.
grew up thinking, for the last 25 years about it differently. Yeah, she had one experience, but it wasn't that one experience that had her not hearing you. It was
Mhm.
everything else and that experience. So anyway, my point is just like, if we were creating a commercial,
Yeah.
like high quality commercial, and we were gonna, nowadays with advertising you could put a commercial in front of anybody that you want to, like specifically a high school student,
Mm.
specifically a middle schooler. Like, what kinds of commercials could we use to describe the chiropractic profession and becoming a chiropractor? I mean, I'm just asking that question. I feel like it's not a
Mhm.
question that's really been asked, and if it has been asked, it hasn't been asked and like stuck with by like a group
Mhm.
of people for long enough to see the experiment tested and gather data of like, if we put it in front of people, will they actually want it? Because I mean, I'm sure you can agree that nobody
Yeah.
knows chiropractic as a educational career path is even an option for them. They're in
Mhm.
a health science or a life science academy in high school, and they've never even heard that this is a possibility. They're in a kinesiology or a biology major in college. They've never even heard that this is a possibility. So it's like, if we were creating a commercial, obviously we need to create many different commercials for many different people at different stages of life. But like, what do you think about that? I mean, I'm curious because everything you've said up until this point is resonating with me, and I'm just like, okay, like, I want your opinion. What do you think? Do we need to create a pre-Chiro council for maybe through the IFCO or through another
Mm.
organization? Do we need to actually have this be an initiative from the profession to really value that next younger generation, or even the older generation or our generation, as far as like a public outreach or a public relations PR situation,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things, right? I really feel like it's everything. Like you said, like we don't have books in the library covering this. Like, and one of the things I dream about doing is like I grew up reading the Bernstein Bears as a kid, right? And it was like the Bernstein Bears go on vacation, the Bernstein Bears go to the zoo, they go to the medical doctor, they go to their grandma's house. Everything you do as a child. But I want like the Bernstein Bears as a chiropractic family. Like the Bernstein Bears, the little bear falls out of the tree and whaps his head. And so they go to the chiropractor to get checked. And then next week, they still go to the chiropractor to get checked, even though nothing's wrong symptomatically, right? And they needed an adjustment. And then they go to the chiropractor when the mama bear is pregnant, and like go through everything and have a whole series of lovable animals as children books that would be popular not because they're about chiropractic, but because they're a lovable book like the Bernstein Bears and infiltrate chiropractic into them, right? So that's something I've been thinking about a long time of like, who could write those? What animal is it? How do we market it? How do we get it to be a mainstream thing where people don't even think, oh, it's about chiropractic? They just think, that's a really healthy family of animals. How do they do that? We should mimic what they do, right? So that's one thing I've been thinking about, but I think you can do that with young kid books. You can do that with young adult books. You can do that with adult books that don't have to be an informational book on chiropractic, that it's just written into things. And I think that's something that like the IFCO can take up, that individual doctors can take up, that patients of ours can take up, right? One of my goals in my office is to get, I know this sounds like a little number, but it's actually, I think, quite a lot. If I could have 250 people in town who are my patients, who fully understand chiropractic and can explain it, that's all I need. Like if every chiropractor had 250 people who could say, no, you don't understand. You need to go to the chiropractor for your life to get checked so you can function optimally, right? And that can state it and will be like our soldiers, and that won't back down. So how do I, as a doctor, feed those 250 people to go out in the world and do that work? Because when it comes from chiropractors, we're like wacky, right? When it comes from a patient, that's completely different, who might even be an ER nurse or an OB nurse, right? Like that would have a lot of power behind it, who can say, I'm the OB nurse here, but you guys need chiropractic for your newborn baby and leading up to it and before you're even pregnant, right? So I'm trying to create those 250 people in my practice. I also think it's also put on the chiropractor, every chiropractor and how they practice. I just started taking like the Dr. Mo Knows, Dr. Mo Knows courses. I don't know if you've heard of those or you're in those at all. But the last live call I was on, she was just talking about HRV and how there's now studies behind HRV that aren't chiropractic studies, but are actual studies like by the medical profession saying that your heart rate variability is the best way to test health, and that the chiropractic adjustment improves heart rate variability. And I'm like, I got to start doing heart rate variability in my office pre and post so I can put that literature out there showing that to people, that it's an improvement in health and it's not just an improvement in their low back pain or their migraines, right? But I also think like if we start grabbing onto research like that and we all bring that into our clinics and we can pool our data saying, you know, I saw 1,000 people this week, you saw 1,000 people this week, and everyone else in the country saw 1,000 people this week. And here's our health rate variability data, and we can put it together and put it out in the masses because other people are already saying that's the best indicator of health. Then we'll have some evidence to back it up, right? So I feel like it comes from all of that. And that's the hard part about it. It's not just one thing. So how do we get all of these places and all these people, all these things in line to do this is the challenge of it all, I think. And
Well, right there, I think that right there was a great segue because
yeah.
when you were introduced to me, I believe it was because you're doing work with students. And I think that identifying the potential that students have, not as much when they're in the chiropractic program, but before they get to the chiropractic program in their pre-chiro time, they have a lot more time available. But having that culture established that, hey, you have an ability to contribute to the profession, right now. You don't have to wait until you've been in practice for 10 years like us. You have been exposed to something at this stage that most people don't get exposed to until they're either out of school or towards the end of school or maybe even in the middle or beginning. But usually it comes later when you have no time to fully integrate it or fully, take it, wrap your head around it, and like kind of be creative because you just have no time. You're passing your classes, blah, blah, blah. But our pre-Chiro students, our Chiro students, we need to like kind of give them jobs, provide an opportunity for them to, or a platform for them to share information and do these different tasks of creating the creative stories or creating the videos of people that they're friends with in college who have learned about chiropractic through them, or create the opportunities for them to go to their guidance counselors or their teachers or whoever and just provide materials that we help them, download and print. But the point is like there is a strategic plan that isn't being talked about. I'm sure it is in certain circles, but not as a profession, not as a bigger
Hmm.
picture conversation. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think there's a lot of people we can utilize in the profession that are, going into chiropractic and they're doing their prereqs or their undergrad and they want to learn more. But I think first what we need to do, and I know this isn't everyone in the profession, but like we need to stop eating our young. Like we need to help them with those projects. We need to somehow compensate them for doing that and not expect them to completely work for free, because I don't like to work for free. And I don't know where that comes from unless they're, just have something they want to do on their own. But I do think we need to get those initiatives rolling because, as you know, like when I was in chiropractic school and before chiropractic school, I thought I'm going to have all this time once I get my business up and rolling. Like, give me a good hard 3 years of work and then like I'm laying back and it's going to be simple. And it's like I'm busier every year. Like I have less time every single year. So I think you're completely right. If we can start utilizing those younger people and their creativity, all the better. And also, I think it's a better idea too, because the further you get into chiropractic, the more you lose sight of where everyone else is at. And so I have to remind myself, oh, yeah, people still take pain medication. What? Like, because I'm so far in it. And I just think, pre chiropractic students, they're still very close to that, most likely, right? And so maybe they could bridge that gap or communicate better in books or on radios or on TV commercials better than we could, or relate better to other people, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah.
but I do think there's a lot of work to be done, right?
So yeah, in regards to that and just bringing it back to the student and centering the voice on not even the student but the chiropractor, it's like how do you stay professionally engaged? What have you sort of been pleasantly surprised?
Mm.
Any courses you've taken, any classes you've taken? Maybe highlight some resources in Gonstead or highlight, obviously you just mentioned Dr. Mo knows. Is there anything else? I know you're involved with the IFCO. Maybe talk about your relationship with them and what your goals are within that organization or some things that you're excited about that organization is doing. If you could keep just kind of unpacking the network of information that you're exposed to so that we can kind of bring students up to speed with what's available.
Hmm. Um, yeah, so I'm on the IFCO board, and I've been on it for I think 2 years now, and I honestly love it because what we're working on is exactly this type of stuff. How do we continue to perpetuate chiropractic around the world? And how do we make sure everyone has the ability to practice chiropractic? Um, and has the legal rights to do it, right? They have the legal rights to analyze, detect, and correct subluxation, but also to be able to take an x-ray in their office, to be able to adjust children in their office. How do we keep doing that, right? But what I also love about it is I get to sit down in a room with the 11 other people on the board and talk chiropractic and to strategize and to try to figure this stuff out. So what I'm in charge of is our student initiative. And the whole idea behind it is that so we have a student club with students in it from, I think, almost every chiropractic college around the world now. And they're in a private Facebook group together. And the idea is that hang on. My do not disturb is on and a phone call still comes through. Why? What's happening? I'm sorry. I don't know why. I think it's
good.
one
This
of
is
the
what
people
video
on my
editors are
emergency
for. Keep rolling with the student initiative. I was really excited when you started bringing that up.
I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me? I can hear you. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, it's me. Hang on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Except I can't hear you at all.
So leave and come back in.
Okay, I'm not great at reading lips. I feel like everything that's gone wrong in this interview has gone wrong. Let me try to pick these up.
Can you hear me
Hello?
now? Can you hear me now?
Oh man, I don't have any sound on.
All right, hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, it's like I feel like everything has gone wrong that could go wrong on this phone call.
Let's get back to it. So the student initiative, break it down.
Yeah, so the student initiative. So the whole idea is that our schools, some of them are great, some of them are not, right? I don't have the power to change the way the schools that aren't philosophically based or are in the medical model. But what I can do is I can reach the students at that school and put them in our IFCO student club online and get them learning the philosophy and expose them to it. So far we've the first Thursday of every month at 8 Eastern, we have a different speaker come in and talk to them on a Facebook Live where they can ask them anything they want. So like Jack Borla was just on, Dr. Mo is going to be on this fall. We've had Lacey Book on, we've had Jake Hansen. I mean, like anyone I can get my hands on. Brian Dooley was on, everyone and anyone. And just to talk to them and to answer their questions about chiropractic and talk philosophy or business or anything that they're not getting in the schools. We've also started a Green Book study that happens the third Thursday of each month, where we're actually going through Stevenson's chiropractic textbook with them. And this we've actually opened up to any IFCO members, docs, or students, just to get people more ingrained in the philosophy. But the whole idea is if they've never heard it at their school, they're going to come out and they're going to be a doctor who doesn't know about it. And it might take them 10 or 20 years until they hear about it, which is crazy. So let's get it to them now when they're in school. The only one step better, which was kind of what you were talking about earlier, would be to get them to a different school that's better, right? That's philosophically based. But really trying to reach the students who are at the schools now, introduce them to the philosophy, and then also get them to events. So this year what the IFCO did is we set up student travel scholarships. I don't know, we sent 4 students to Mile High this year to get them exposed to stuff, and we paid their hotel room and then also their airfare. And then we sent, maybe 12 kids out to New Beginnings for them to hear and understand philosophy from the New Beginnings folks. So I think that's a program where it's brand new this year, but probably going to repeat in future years. So that way they can get out there, they can get talking to docs, they can understand this is the way to practice. And like get their head in the game, so to say. And then we send them all kinds of stuff. We're sending the students green books for free. We're sending them t-shirts and anything we can get them to get them excited about it and excited about what we're doing, because students get pulled in 1,000 directions while they're in school. But that's really been my big focus this year with the IFCO, is to get the students more invested in the philosophy, which is wonderful. As for programs and books and stuff like that, I love Dr. Meinholz. I'm brand new to it, but it's phenomenal, and it gives you a good rooting in how to explain the science to your patients, but still in a philosophical standpoint. You're not explaining, how the neurology changed it so they don't have sciatica, right? You're explaining it of how it improved their brain function, how it improved their HRV. So it's really incredible stuff. I love that. I also love going to Gonstead seminars to brush up on my technique and remember that, because it's easy to get sloppy in practice because your patients don't have any idea what you're supposed to be doing or what's correct, right? So to keep me accountable that way. Beyond that, I think the most important thing is to have really good mentors and a really good group of friends that are also chiropractors who are philosophical. And so I found in school that I have 2 friends from school yet that are still very philosophical and in the profession. My other friends who were in that have since, they didn't quite get it. They've dropped out of the profession. One's selling real estate, one's in acupuncture. Because clearly they didn't really understand the chiropractic idea. But getting friends that get it. So you're not out there on the island totally lost, and you're not feeling like the only weirdo who's talking about the big idea, right? That you can talk to your friends in different areas, different countries, and help the other person stay on track, right? And then also learn with them, hey, how do you explain this to a patient? What do you do here? What is Stevenson talking about, right? That's extremely important to keep ourselves sharp. So
Yeah, there's so much that you can stay engaged with that it always amazes me when somebody goes right into a functional medicine or right into an acupuncture program or right into medical school, right out of chiropractic school. I look at it as a major failure of the chiropractic educational process. It's a funny word, educational process, with the educated mind, innate mind. But point is like there's no sort of compass that keeps people pointing towards chiropractic, depending on like, oh, I'm out here. Well, at least I know this is not chiropractic. Like I'm consciously choosing to go study something that's not chiropractic, as opposed to thinking you're studying chiropractic when you're studying functional medicine in chiropractic school, or different things that constantly distract students, and they get inspired because there's great speakers everywhere that can flip a switch in your mind and get you excited and attracted to something. But it's like, I think if we're talking a student initiative, the true student initiative is to include pre-Chiro students with Chiro students and create a culture that no matter what school they go to, they have shared experiences. They know what chiropractic is and what it isn't. They know why they're going to chiropractic school. They have friends that they've met through our network that we're building, or through the community that's been built for them, that is keeping them feeling that they're with people as they're going through this, that they're not the one chiropractic focused student at their school. And then also, if they are that one chiropractic focused person at that school, giving them a opportunity, like you said, we got to pay them, it's not free, to go to that school, like the point people, and say, hey, I've been exposed to things that I believe are important and relevant, and it's not easy. I went to a school like that, and then I got exposed, and then when I was trying to expose other people to those things, I was given a lot of pushback, which meant that I had to transfer rather immediately to get to a more like-minded community. But the point is like, I just feel like those mistakes, like the mistake that I made, wouldn't be made if I was exposed earlier and connected on a deeper level to chiropractic, which is why we're doing these podcasts, because like things you've talked about are really on message, but also there's depth in there, and I just think students need to recognize the depth
Yep.
early and often, so that they're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot. Because I think people get maybe confused that chiropractic is almost too simple for them,
Hmm.
that they're not sure where to go with it. They're like, oh, this
Hmm.
is this is it.
Yep. Yeah, and I would even say like, when I was a student, I mean, I was going to Gonstead seminars and, other like philosophical seminars, and like I would, at the time, right? This sounds really bad, but I'm kind of a shy person. I'm an introvert. So I would go have a drink of alcohol. And then I would go up and I'd find these old chiropractors who've been in practice 40, 50, 60 years, whatever it is, and introduce myself to them, right? And um talk to them and try to understand. I remember this one guy was like, DD Palmer founded this profession on tone. Do you know what that means? And I was like, no. Like, I have no idea, right? I'm like, third try. What do you mean tone, right? And but I think even doing that for students, like students can do that at any school. They can travel for cheap. Most of the time at the seminars, you know, chiropractors will buy you drinks, they'll buy you food, right? But just trying to get a connection. And then once you have a connection with that one person, you can get their phone number, you can call them, you can talk to them, because you have to be surrounded in that community. You have to be around like minded people. Because, like you said, there is no compass that's going to keep bringing us back, or there is no direct navigation route, right? But one thing I have found is that, in chiropractic, in my like school time and in my early year, like first couple years out, I kept thinking like, well, when's somebody going to ask me to come do this, or when's somebody going to ask me to do that? Like, it's not invitation only, right? Like, if people want to write books on chiropractic for kids, or if they want to start a podcast, or if they want to be on a board, you kind of just have to step up and volunteer and say, hey, I'd like to do that. What do I need to do? Or you just need to write the book, or you just need to start the podcast. And I feel like that's an issue in our profession too. People like were like I was, right? And they don't think, oh, I could just do that. Like, that's what people do. They just create it and get going and get it out there. So one thing to remember too, as a student or a newer doc or pre-chiropractic student, you can just start something. Like, you don't have to have permission. You don't have to be asked. Just start doing it, right?
Hmm. On that note, if somebody was starting their own pre-Chiro club on their
Hmm.
college campus, can you give them maybe some pointers as to how they should approach it, how they should think of it, whether they should open a business bank account and actually treat it like a business, or whether they should treat it like a student club?
Mm,
Maybe some activities that they can bring into the culture of that pre-Chiro student club, because I think giving them ideas is going to also help them take that next step that you said, that it's like just do it, but it's like do
yeah.
what? And maybe people don't have that clarity inside like you or I have with the insight.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think you can run it like a business or you can run it like a club. To start off with, it's probably a lot easier to just start it like a club, and you can transition it over to running it like a business if you'd like to, right? Um, what I would do if I was them is they can get in contact with me through the IFCO, and we can help put things in place, and we can help connect them to doctors to start talking. We can help bring speakers into them. We can help host events for them, either virtually or in person, right? But if I was them, I would try to focus on what makes us unique and what makes us different. I would focus on the big idea that we work with the innate intelligence and we work with the universal intelligence, just to get people's body functioning properly. I would have them start and focus on that. And don't worry about techniques. Don't worry about what your practice will look like. Don't worry about anything else. Just get to understanding chiropractic and why it's unique and different from any other type of healthcare. And then that other stuff can build in later, right? And will naturally come. But I'd focus on that. And I think I would draw off people, organizations like the IFCO for help. Maybe there's a doctor in their area that's philosophically based that they could go connect with and say, hey, we'd like help starting this. I know if a student approached me, like if an undergrad student in my area said they wanted to do that before they got to chiropractic school, I would be thrilled, right? Um, and I'd also say they could also connect with philosophical schools about getting a pre-chiropractic program started up at their undergraduate school. So it's funny you bring this up because last time I was down at Sherman College just for their Lyceum, I was talking to Dr. Neil Cohen about this. And I said, in my town, I have a liberal arts school, a 4-year liberal arts school, and Northeast Iowa Community College, which is, the community, they can get 2 or 4-year degrees there. And I said, how do I get a chiropractic program at both of those? And he was like, you're just thinking of this now? Like, you've been there 9 years, And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I would say too, like, he's willing to help me to understand what curriculum that would need and how they can partner with Sherman. So you can always reach out to a school as well and get help. So I think my biggest thing for them, as you guys are probably hearing me say, is reach out to other people. You don't have to do that heavy lift on your own. You can
Keep
delegate.
going. I gotta grab my charger. Keep going. I'll be right back.
Yeah, absolutely. So what people can do is they can delegate, they can call other people. And another good place to start is to look for other places that already have that model and then to copy what they do. Because it's likely we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And so if we can look at other places who maybe already have a program like that, or other people who are doing a similar thing, we can get that up and rolling that way. So, all
All right, well,
right.
listen, hey, I appreciate all the time that you've spent here today. Um, there's so much work that we can do just as
Mm-hmm.
individuals. It's been blowing my mind of having, I think it's only been about a month that I've had like 2 pre-chiro students and then 2 current chiropractic students in their first year helping me with this project. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you
Cool.
talked about there's no navigation. That's what we're trying to create here is a navigation system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Kind of tease out the layers, that
Yeah.
I just been creative about it, and there's way more than this, but there's like 10 stages of development to
Mm.
become a chiropractor. And, I'll just, if you're interested, I'll rattle them off. But
Yeah.
basically, so first stage is, what is chiropractic? Why do people become chiropractors? Hearing the pre-chiro story that people have had of like why they chose to become a chiropractor and like what are the basics of like the history of chiropractic, what does chiropractic mean, and what does it represent. And then the second stage is skill building. So the way I am framing the skill building is I broke innate up into your inner state, and it's your inner scientist, your inner
Mm.
thinker, your inner artist, your inner teacher, and your inner entrepreneur. So just getting people to kind of orient themselves to like the science, philosophy, art, business, and communication without using those words.
Mm.
And the third stage is to experience chiropractic. So the apprenticeship model, um, basically just outlining like if we were going to have a structured apprenticeship where we say paid you, the chiropractor, to facilitate a 5 session opportunity for a student and
Mm.
then give them feedback on their professionalism or their communication or their timeliness or just their helpfulness or their presence. Basically, helping the students throughout those 5 visits to the chiropractic office receive care, observe like the back end and the front end of the office. And yeah, the fourth
Mm-hmm.
stage would be the pre-chiro student startup. So it would be all about starting your own pre-chiro club and or not pre-chiro club, just starting your own something, like you said, stepping out and doing something that you're passionate about, and being vulnerable and experiencing those voluntary discomforts that are so valuable. And then the fifth step would be the capstone independent study creative project that would fill
Mm.
a lot of these needs that we have of like students spending 3 months working on a children's 15-page book on chiropractic or whatever. There's like many directions, infinite
Yeah.
directions, infinite diversity. The sixth stage is the admissions process. So exposing them to the schools that are going to give them the best chiropractic education, exposing them to the resources that they need to most effectively adapt to their new environment, whether it be housing or whether it be
Mm.
student clubs available, just exposing them to like these campus maps that we have current
Mm.
students creating of like what are the best places to study, what are the best places to eat, what are the best places to live. Then the seventh stage is like your Chiro student experience of like mapping out based on like these cycles, these like mini cycles of like first you get exposed, then you really work hard at developing something, or you go deep into something and then you reflect back on it, and maybe you leave a
Mm.
legacy by creating something for the students that come after you, just building that into the culture. And then the eighth stage is now you're not a Chiro student anymore, but you're a student Chiro. So you're in the clinic, you're taking care of people, you're working on what it's like for you to now be a chiropractor. And then the ninth stage is, you're fresh into practice. How do you start your practice? Like, what do you want to
Mm.
do? Like, giving them like all the different variables, all the different outlines on like what types of ba 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 do you want to do?
Mhm.
Like, giving them options, not telling them how to do it. And then the 10th stage is like professional engagement. How do you stay engaged? How do you keep growing? How do you keep learning? How do you get involved with organizations? How do you create your own thing? There's a
Mhm.
framework that could be helpful for people like you or I to know where the outlets are that we could plug ourselves into based on our interests and values.
Mhm.
So that's been like crystallizing since I was a second quarter student and realized that I chose the wrong school and transferred and realized how
Mm.
different the educational process was. But it's stuck with me throughout the years. It's kept that fire inside of me going. It's kept me more excited than most people that get out into practice, and then it just
Mhm.
becomes about like other things. And to me, it's still about who I was, uh, what I was looking for
Mm.
as a sort of pre-Cairo student, and how it wasn't there for me, how it didn't exist, and
Mhm.
how who I was when I went to chiropractic school and what I was looking for, and how disenchanted I became by like what I signed up for,
Yeah.
and then transferring and just recognizing that the students in my previous school would never have those same access to those
Mm.
resources and same opportunities that I had, and just having empathy for them, but also recognizing that it's like, is anybody working to like solve? Because as a
Mhm.
chiropractor, as you know, one of the biggest things that we come away with when we graduate chiropractic school is the ability to think for ourselves, the ability to think differently, ask questions, see gaps, see subluxations in our environment,
Mhm.
in our friends and our families' behaviors, in our relationships, blah, 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 and all of our stuff. So there's a lot of inner work to be done, but it's like the more you do that inner work, the more you realize like, hey, this is actually relevant to the pre-chiro student, or hey, this is actually relevant to the chiropractic student, or these
Yeah.
are real things I'm dealing with as a chiropractor making money now. So anyway, that was
Mhm.
long-winded, but I try to keep it concise of like, that's just me. That's just one person and what I'm capable of. And I've been talking about doing this project for over 10 years now. Like I even created my own
Mm.
Cairo Movement Club, and I had like an online community with like 17 schools in 8 countries,
Wow.
all trying to feed them information and give them access to resources that they didn't have depending on which school they were at. But like,
Mm.
you know, life gets in the way. You pick it back up because it's important to you. And obviously, I've had friends that have supported me throughout the process, but I
Yeah.
just tell you all these things to show you that like I'm just one person. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it gives me the recognition that like if we were to build a more connected profession and if we were to have students be clear on what the pathways that they can take are, what the absolutely all the resources are that are out there that have been created by chiropractors for other chiropractors, but are super relevant to students. If we could have them recognize that like there's 15 different types of table companies, 15 different types of chiropractic tools, you know, 150 different student clubs depending on what school you go to. If we could connect the student clubs, if we could connect the schools, if we could
Yeah.
connect the pre-chiro students to the chiro students and have there be like a mentorship that you could like literally pay to get mentored by a current chiropractic student and that money goes to the chiropractic students. Like if there
Hmm.
was opportunities for pre-chiro students to get paid to start their own club and then be given like resources that cost money to go give them to the guidance counselors and the presidents, the blah blah blah, the teachers. Like there's so much that I've thought of personally of
Mm-hmm.
like if there were chiropractors
Yeah.
if there were chiropractors in the health centers on college campuses and we
Yes.
reframe the freshman 15 to not you gaining 15 pounds but you gaining 15 new lifestyle habits from college and that's all brought to you by like maybe we don't call it chiropractic, maybe we call it student wellness. But it, like you
Hmm.
mentioned, it doesn't have to be in the name of chiropractic, but chiropractic has to have its presence in the health and wellness model that's being promoted to these
Yes.
campuses, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I want to talk more about that, but I do have a person coming to meet me at 9:30. But I do think we should chat more about what you're just saying and all of these ideas we both have. And especially like your 10 steps. I love those because I feel like that's something the IFCO can help you perpetuate, right? And take on and like get more money behind it, get more people behind it, get more thinkers, right? And just keep all of this moving because it's exactly what we need, right? Because if we can funnel students into better schools, those other ones are going to die off. And when they are in the other schools, even if they're still there, they can understand chiropractic will be pumping out better grads, right?